right. GM, everyone. I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. Thanks for joining us. Today's a pretty niche topic, and so I'm glad to see people interested in talking about this stuff. I had some slides prepared, and they didn't get sent through, which is my bad. To just give a bit of context around what we're talking about today, topic is autonomous worlds. I think I'll just skip the intro and discuss, do some scene setting while we're having our conversations with the panelists here. Maybe as a quick introduction about myself. So my name is Nico. I'm part of the BITKRAFT team. I am the guy on the BITKRAFT team that is into weird stuff, which includes very niche areas at the intersection of Web3 and gaming. And as a part of that, I've been the one who has pushed some of our investments in the fully on-chain gaming space, two of which are here. And so maybe I'll do introductions. I think that's fun. Sure. Yeah, otherwise I know David will talk for 10 minutes about himself, so that's not true. So David here has had a decade-long career. He has built games for PlayStation, he has built games for mobile, he has built games for PC, and about 3 years ago now, he decided to start a new venture and thought, okay, this Web3 thing is interesting, but I'm not that interested in what all the other people are doing about making a game with NFTs. And he said, what can I do more? And he fell in love with the idea of using the blockchain as the one source of truth and the world to build a game on. And so he started Playmint, and that's been 2.5 years now, or 3 years now of building fully on chain, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of learnings there.
Good intro. That's all correct.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have Matt. Matt has also a decade-long career by now. He spent time at EA, mostly product roles.
Yeah, product management historically, largely on the mobile side.
There you go. And one of the things that he did was he started a newsletter called Dark Tunnels, which if you're interested in what we're talking about today, we highly recommend. And more recently, this year, he joined a company called Cartridge. Cartridge is, maybe you can talk about what Cartridge does later, and also one of our portfolio companies. So we, this year, led Cartridge's Series A round, and Matt does business development mostly there.
Biz dev, product strategy, and content.
There we go. So yeah, thanks for being here. And then finally, you have Raf. Raf, decades of game design experience, correct? Going from companies like CCP Games, Dapper Labs. What was the EA, was that? No.
Ubisoft.
Ubisoft, that was it. I forgot. Thanks, sorry.
Long time ago.
Yeah, long time ago.
You don't seem happy about that. Yeah, I was doing AAA shooters. It wasn't easy.
You have spent 1 year at a company called Lattice, who, if you guys are familiar with the fully on-chain gaming space, you might know from an engine called Mud. You've designed fully on-chain games there, and now you're an entrepreneur in residence at a fund called 1KX, who are also very active in the more crypto-native side of gaming.
Yes, I also design fully on-chain games at Dapper.
At Dapper?
Yeah.
Yeah. CryptoKitties, right?
Yeah.
Which in a way was also a fully on-chain game.
Yeah, no, 3, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Good. So I think this is a fantastic panel to talk about the idea of autonomous worlds. The way I'd like to do this is maybe level set with what an autonomous world is, how we understand this, and there might already be disagreements from that very point. We could talk about the potential of the idea of autonomous worlds, kind of where we are today and where we are on the way to that potential, and then what the future holds and looks like, and how we get to actually unlock this potential and how we see this. All right?
Let's go.
Let's go. So maybe, David, you kick us off with this why you ended up wanting to do this and be in this space.
All right, I'll start on that then. I think there's often something interesting happens when some new medium, some new piece of technology meets games. I've seen that many times before. And often the most I've made mistakes in the past where I've just taken a little bit of that thing and then done mostly the game that I was doing before. I think the best times when I've done that, I've just jumped right in. And so jumping right in Web3 games in 2021 was fully on-chain games, which is insanity at the time because there was only Ethereum at that point, so the first game we built was on directly on Ethereum. And then, yeah, we sort of, I think there's a different kind of product that you can build by being fully on-chain, although to be honest, that's not particularly clear. We're still exploring what that is. and there are some interesting affordances that feels like they could build some games that wouldn't be possible without that technology. And so sort of walking down that long, dark corridor, figuring out what the best products we can build are.
Yes. Matt, maybe, yeah, it might be good for you to maybe give some background about Cartridge. I think that's useful. And then maybe give us your view of like how you understand the term autonomous worlds.
Sure. So I'll start with Cartridge. Cartridge makes the tooling and infrastructure to help developers build fully on-chain games and hopefully autonomous worlds. We are the core contributors to an open source tool chain called Dojo, t-shirt. And we also have our own products on top of that. We have one called Slot, which is like a roll-up as a service. You can deploy L3s, ephemeral roll-ups, permanent roll-ups. And then we have Controller, which is like our smart wallet onboarding product. Setting that aside, the question is, how do I view autonomous worlds? Maybe I have a slightly different point of view here. I think it's kind of like a buzzword. It's approaching metaverse territory rapidly. But I think there may be some things we can agree on. So let's say maximally on-chain, if not entirely on-chain. Maybe aspects of it are provably on-chain. I think there's the autonomous part of it, right? It can run by itself. I create a game, and let's say I go bankrupt. You know, David could come along later on, build his own client, and still play the game, so long as the underlying settlement layer still exists. The smart contracts are there. They're immutable. They're on the blockchain. Anyone can, you know, permissionlessly interact with them. And then I suppose there's the worlds part, which has, maybe you can speak more to this, the sort of like introductory rules, the quote-unquote digital physics. They get talked about a lot. So these are, I guess, some of the tenets that are often discussed in the space. But in terms of actual products today that meet those standards, let's say few, if any.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. I think it's a very commercially viable term. We can put it like that, as Metaverse once was. I think that it had a purpose, but I think that fully on-chain games do unlock unique things. And it goes back a little bit to the first talk, right? When you think about modding, for instance, or you think about UGC, right? The lines between what is a game. Is Roblox a game or is it a platform? It gets a little bit blurred. So that's number two. When you think about what putting a game fully on chain allows in that space, is that it becomes an even more powerful platform. Because as Matt said, it minimizes, basically erases platform risk. It also allows for unique ways of monetizing the mod or whatever you have developed on top of that platform. You no longer have to ask for Roblox for your share. You just make your own coin. And if your little part of the game is successful, your coin goes up. You monetize it whatever the way you want, right? Independent of the platform that you're running on. So that kind of dynamic is, I think that, so it's really not new. It's not like, oh, it's going to change, though it's something we've never seen before. It's going to exacerbate and give, you know, turbo drive to some things that we already see. It really fits well that. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it. But that said, it's very early. It's fucking hard to do. It's very, very, like, you know, primitive tech. And yeah, as we all, whoever tried to build there, we know the pain.
Yeah. So listening to you, trying to take a step back and maybe like pitch it back to you to just formalize this. When I hear you say like the idea of autonomous worlds and some of the problems that it solves, yesterday up on stage, Aaron was talking about some of the problems that exist within the gaming industry today, which is, you know, the platforms that holds like a very large amount of the economic power, that take a 30% cut on every dollar you make, and some of the problems that brings for, you know, actually being able to build a business, right? I know that us as a venture firm, we are, we're careful, or we take that strongly into account, and we are always looking for businesses that are doing something that avoids the current status quo of the gaming market, just because it's so difficult to build a very big business on top of that. And so having a sort of neutral, decentralized base layer as the foundation to build businesses on takes away some of that product risk. The second part of that, as I understand it, and maybe that's not exactly what you're talking about, but I'm assuming that's also something you think about, which is the base layer of the blockchain is essentially like this sort of decentralized computer, which is completely permissionless and ultimately flexible as a Turing-complete machine, meaning that the kind of experiences that someone can build on top of any autonomous worlds are like functionally endless and go beyond all of the limitations that the initial autonomous world creator had in mind. So there's the permissionless decentralization, there is the like flexibility, and then finally the part that you mentioned was monetization, which is you are very flexible in what you can build, unlimited, and obviously there's no take rates or no built-in take rates that get siphoned away. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I give you an analogy that I'm using at the moment?
Go ahead.
That is, it's quite hard to imagine something that doesn't exist yet, and autonomous worlds don't exist, and we're struggling to define it. The way that an analogy I'm using at the moment is that I remember when the internet was first about, prior to that, there was AOL and CompuServe, and they were fine. I remember using those, and I thought they were great at the time, but there was a step change when it went from being CompuServe and AOL to being the internet. Like, it just exploded. And I think that popular products like Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, all places where you can create content, and they're clearly a popular thing for people to do, but I still feel like we're in the CompuServe AOL territory. It's a world that's owned and operated by one big corporate company. And I instinctively feel like if you were to allow people to build experiences in a truly autonomous world, then you'd see sort of a Cambrian explosion of experiences in the same way as we did when we went for those gated sort of AOL and CompuServe to the internet. And you know, some of it is about what you can build. Like, there's nobody to ask, is it okay if I build this thing? It's also you're free to commercialize it how you want. Because you're free to commercialize it how you want, then it's easier to get investment, and there's no take rate. And so, like, I just think that the breadth of experiences becomes much greater in an autonomous world than a centralized autonomous world like Roblox, let's say.
And if you look back at some of the sort of history of gaming, you know, this is a sort of a tired story, but we all know about battle royales and, you know, auto battlers coming out of modding communities. There's a long history of mods and composability leading to creative breakthroughs that happen because these tools are available to the community to sort of build as they see fit. And in sort of the Roblox and UEFN examples, like, yeah, you can build a lot of things on those platforms, but they can deplatform you. They can take a huge take rate of whatever it is that you're building. They might decide that, hey, you know, you built a really cool game there. We're going to just copy it, and they own discoverability as well. So if no one sees your game, they're going to go to the one that is branded the same as the platform. So there are all sorts of issues with centralization that these sorts of autonomous worlds, fully on-chain games can provide remedies to.
So we talked about platform shifts historically in games, and those have led to major innovations. Something that I personally struggle with when I think about the idea of fully on-chain games, autonomous worlds, and perhaps even Web3 more broadly, is that in previous technological shifts, it was not very hard to imagine the kind of products that were uniquely enabled by these shifts and how they would find product market fit at scale. Today, especially in the short term, I still struggle with understanding what that product market fit at scale looks like for fully on-chain games / autonomous worlds, or even Web3 more broadly. What it seems like to me when I look at the markets, those product market fits indications have mostly been around speculation and the financialization of things. Is that unavoidable? Is that, I see you're like ready to talk about this. Okay, I've said enough. Go ahead, Rafa, I'm curious.
It's healthy.
It's healthy. It's
I
a good
found
thing.
it incredibly healthy because,
Okay.
like, I think it's very Darwinian, right? Like, yeah, let's get like, you know, it's how evolution happens, right? By dying and all of this. So I was talking to David earlier, and I was saying, like, are there any autonomous worlds? No, there are none, and I don't think this thing exists. I think it's like, you know, I see that people kind of, are they in the room with us, like that kind of shit. I don't think this is, but there are things that really bring up the principles. Pump.fun for me is really, really cool, and it is something that is permissionless. You do whatever the hell you want, and then you create the experience. And yes, of course, people like money. It's a huge carrot. And yeah, it's going to work. So that's the motivation now. Yes, it is. And it will probably for a long time. So we got to kind of accept it. And there's another point, too, that's really, really important. People sometimes overlook. As we think of games, 99% of games don't have trading, peer-to-peer trading. I can only think of one, and it's EVE Online. I worked for a couple of years. It's a mess. When you have players trading amongst each other the assets of the game, it makes everything fucking complicated. You look at any other game, they don't do it because it's bad, because it's really, really hard to do. When you put a game on chain, it's kind of, it happens naturally. You cannot stop it. And just to design the experience, that's a huge mess. Because it creates space for speculation and making money. And people will do it. And the easiest way is what? Ponzi after Ponzi after Ponzi. So yeah, I think it comes with the territory. And you have to be happy with it.
I find that depressing that all fully on-chain games, autonomous worlds, just will lead to speculation. Is that first of all, is that what you're saying?
No, I think it's something that will happen naturally, but they don't have necessarily to be that all the time. It depends on the people, right? But that's a big carrot. It's too big a carrot to ignore and pretend it doesn't exist. You have to somehow incorporate it into the design.
I think maybe a slight distinction between speculation and financialization. I think the financialization is inevitable. It's going to happen because of the crypto payment rails. And perhaps to your point, it would behoove the developer to build some of that in, or to at least take that into account in the beginning, so that you don't have the community kind of, running rampant. They're going to do what they want. It's permissionless. But at least if you provide sort of a path, is like, here's the way we see this being financialized, you can sort of set the ball rolling in a direction that you're more comfortable with. But speculation is, I think, maybe a subset persona of the users right now.
Can I?
Please.
Yeah, because that didn't work for the Fed. We had 2008 crisis in the real world, people trying to hold speculation back, and derivatives just went out of control. And in a game, if it's truly autonomous, if it's truly permissionless, yes, there will be finance people doing derivatives that are going to generate speculation. And yes, it's a danger, but then it's a kind of a radical perspective where people are going to have to protect themselves, unless you will start to centralize what can be deployed. And so in Roblox, it won't happen. So, that's it.
So, Raf, when I hear you speak, you're saying that based on, because we are at a very basic level as humans, degenerate gamblers, every type of, financializable product, which ultimately every autonomous world becomes, implodes upon itself because of that speculation. Is that inevitable? And if not, how do you avoid it?
I didn't say that.
I said a lot of things that you said. I put a lot of words in your mouth. What did you not say?
I think that this kind of behavior will happen within this context. It doesn't mean that it's not everybody's behavior, but it will happen.
Okay.
Right now, we see this specific kind of people attracted to this space because it's really free and they can do that, wildly. But it's not, because the people who just want to play games and have fun, they are much better off getting a mobile game or, getting a console or something like that. So.
Another thing I've been thinking about a lot is, are we limiting our imagination by thinking about autonomous worlds as like sort of 3D or even 2D environments where, one person has one character and you're walking around and like the very traditional narrow mindset of what we think about as like a video game. You mentioned Pump.fun as being, kind of an autonomous world. Is that an area that you think more of the people in the space should be looking at and thinking about?
I think that we say, when we talk about game, it's super dangerous, especially in Web3, when you talk about games, and we go immediately to this archetype of a game. And it usually has an avatar in a 3D world that you move around and all that. But then, okay, fine, mobile game. What is Candy Crush? Where's the avatar, right? There's no avatar in Candy Crush. It's still a game. There are so many forms that play can happen. And so yeah, we have to stop, you know, this kind of archetype. It's kind of the danger of the metaverse, right? Because like it becomes this thing. So yeah, 100%. You are not bound by a physical presence. You're bound by the wallet. That would be the closest thing you would have as an avatar in this operational system, is just a wallet, because that's the entity that interacts with the logic. That's it.
Okay.
Please.
Well, there's some. I still think there's something magical in the idea that there's a digital place that exists that isn't owned by anybody in particular, and it's owned and operated by the people inside that world. To me, like, that's still a really exciting idea. It's hard to know exactly how all that works, but like, that's an idea that's really grabbed me. The fact that there's this world that isn't owned by any one company, and so, like, and I immediately go to what you say, which is like a world that looks a bit like Minecraft, I suppose, and people moving around and trading with each other. It's also a really big game to build. So it is a challenge.
I think both of these views are compatible. You know, one thing I think you've said in the past, or question you've raised, is like, is Bitcoin an autonomous world? And you know, we're just talking about like sort of the representation of an AW, like, is, you know, avatars in 3D or 2D space. I don't think that has to happen. It could be text-based. Like, that's gaming's history. It could totally come from text and numbers on a screen. And part of the beauty of being composable and headless by nature is that, you know, anyone can build their own experience that reflects that data in their own way. So, you know, if Rafa wanted to build a 3D version of the data on chain and David wanted to do 2D, these are fully compatible with one another. They're based on the same underlying data.
Yeah, and it goes to the fact that it's an underlying set of rules that provide meaningful interaction between the agents. That's it, right? That's all it is. Now, what form it takes, what UI it takes, and again, considering where we are in terms of latency and transaction confirmation and all those things, we are kind of better off not using avatars.
Is the EVE team calling their new game an autonomous world? Do you think it is?
No.
Okay, John in the last presentation ended up with a number of predictions. I'm known to like my spicy takes, and so I'd love for you guys to maybe look 5 years ahead and talk us through briefly what you think about, like, what you think autonomous worlds look like in 2029. I know it's tough.
I'm not starting this one.
Okay, Raf.
Me?
Yes.
I think we may have some kind of weird platforms where things get deployed on top and different experiences, and yeah, I think we could have that. I don't know if it's going to be avatars. I honestly don't know, because I've seen many experiences at this point, and they are weird. But I still think that in 5 years from now, it's going to be it's still going to be very much motivated by some form of financialization, because you really can't escape that at this point.
One of the predictions he made was that, you know, quote-unquote pure Web3 gaming, which in this sense I'll take to mean autonomous worlds or fully on-chain games, will remain a niche genre, and I endorse that prediction. I think that makes total sense. I think there's a lot of things that you can do with fully on-chain games, and much of that is still unexplored, but I think certain genres are better fits and always will be better fits, and I think the audience will remain niche, but that doesn't mean it's not meaningful. It could monetize extremely deeply. And then on the AW front, like, I think that there will be multiple launches that try to fully become autonomous, whether it's Citadel guys, whether it's Eternum and the Realms ecosystem. There's going to be others who try and do this and hand over governance to the community and let the game kind of run itself perpetually. People will try, and we'll see how successful it is, but I have no doubt that it's going to happen. We'll just see to what magnitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I've come to realize that the full vision of autonomous worlds is just not an easy or it's not an easy or quick thing to build. So I think that something that is an autonomous world probably needs to be a thinner version of what it will be ultimately. Like I think trying to build the Minecraft or No Man's Sky version of an autonomous world now it's just too big a project with too many unknowns. And I think I've come to realize that there needs to be some baby steps between that. And that may look like pumped up fun or something that I haven't historically thought of as an autonomous world, but it has aspects of it that you use to then grow into the next thing, to the next thing, whether it's from the same team or a different team. So I think that it probably doesn't look like the 3D world that I imagine. I think it ends up being something a bit different.
I want to add something there. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know there will be a community. So it's a little bit like an esport. You can't say your game is an esport unless people are playing it for you. So you can try to make it like that. So if you wanted to actually be this kind of place where people build things on top and all that, I'm not using the words, but you need to have a community, and that community has to really be invested in the thing, maybe financially, but not necessarily, definitely emotionally. So once you have that, where that leads, so basically I think the community is going to lead that, and then you follow them. So yeah.
I think I agree with you that there has to be a community for these things to evolve into a proper, sort of self-sustaining world. But just to take a contrarian point of view for a moment, I think you would find this interesting, Tim. Like, what if that community is just bots? Right. Because they're on a level playing field with humans. Theoretically, it's just an address on the blockchain.
Bots are
that could happen. Yeah.
Bots are people, by the way.
Okay, fair enough. But like, is that a community then? If it's just bots transacting with one another?
If they are building things on top, yes.
Okay.
They're just contributing to the dead internet that we already love,
if they are building things on top, or they are content for people to build things on top, they are fine.
Let me. You're a future gazer. You can't ask that question and not expect it.
I hope to avoid this. Yeah.
You don't have to.
No, I want to. I think I just want to say something different because, like, I kind of agree with all of you. I think that some of the most exciting opportunities will happen outside of what we traditionally consider as games, right? The pump.fun type of things. I've talked to many of you about what's Small Brain does. He built like these really fun consumer applications that are like more toys than what we would consider like a game. And I think that there's a lot of really, really fun and interesting things to be built there. And so I would say that let's make this more clear. I think that the most successful autonomous world by any definition will be less of a game as we would traditionally think about it, and more of something different. And don't ask me what that looks like. That'll be my prediction next year. Okay.
I'm with you, and if I could, leave the audience with something, that if you're thinking about building a game or an experience fully on chain, like that's partially why it's so fascinating to me, is because we just don't know. Like we're in that kind of like fuck around and find out phase where like try something fun and see what happens. We just don't know because it's vastly unexplored from a game design perspective, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's almost like I don't know how many parts of the games industry are unexplored. This is
so few, right?
Yeah. I can't. This is probably the only one that springs to mind for me. I don't know. Maybe there's some things around AI or AR or something.
Sure, but interestingly, those sort of converge with fully on chains, whether it's bots that are on chain. We talk about sort of the composability UGC aspect, enabling more people to participate in contributing to these autonomous worlds. AI does a lot of that. And then you talk about sort of like novel distribution platforms. Well, most crypto games are web-based right now. And now we've got Telegram, we've got Discord, and others experimenting with web-based distribution. And I think these things could converge in really interesting and unexpected ways.
Yes. We still have a bit of time left, so if there's any audience questions, feel free to shout them out. Yes, Sam.
Sure. When it comes to front ends, right, when we talk about fully autonomous worlds, what do you guys think is fair play for what could be, what is too much front end, what is, not enough? What I'm trying to get at is, if I build something that looks like Farmville functionally, all of the back end is probably an autonomous world. Would you guys categorize that as an autonomous world, or do we even have to start moving front end logic?
I didn't quite catch the end of that, but if I'm understanding correctly, you know, these things, because they're headless, you know, people can then sort of take your, I guess the question, follow-up question is like, is it a closed source front end? And that's, you know, potential business model, right? You could monetize on the client side while the protocol is relatively permissionless. Or if it's open source or at least partially exposed to the public, well, then they could fork your client and improve it in some ways or do plugins like we saw with Dark Forest. So, you know, I personally don't have an issue with you taking whatever sort of front-end approach you want, so long as the game itself is open to builders to... It's really like, you have to start the network somehow, right? So you want to make it open in some ways. If you're going to put in all that effort, you want to start that flywheel somehow, get other people building on your client or augmenting it or forking it. It's really kind of up to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there people who are doing front-end stuff, like, you know, really, truly open source, fully autonomous?
I mean, Loot Survivor is doing...
Yeah.
SkyStrife was fully open source, and it actually one of the concepts that we used in SkyStrife was client agnostic. The game can be played by bots, can be played by scripts. That was one of the points to really push that forward, but we don't call it an AW, because don't use that word.
Yeah, the Loot Survivor team is also doing something in that area, which you'll hear more about in the coming months. And I believe Pirate Nation has at least been open with like giving people access to those kind of tools. I can't really speak for them, but that's my understanding.
Fantastic. Well, we're out of time, so I want to thank the panel. This was fantastic. I enjoyed this. Thank you all for being here, and I think there's now something happening upstairs, so let's go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.